by the way, when I was researching, it's kind of cool hanging out with someone before doing research because I was like, oh yeah, he was in fashion. Okay, well he is a well-dressed kind of guy. Oh, okay, he was a business guy at the startup. Oh, that makes sense. And then it was like, in his free time, he's a pilot for private jets and helicopters. And I'm just like, well, wait a minute.
This came from nowhere. Yeah.
Like Wikipedia. But so you fly helicopters and everything?
So it's funny. I learned to fly helicopters as soon as I got the certificate. That's the last time I flew. I wanted to check it out of the box and understand. And I really think it's unsafe.
It's unsafe.
I felt like the entire. I did 40 hours, so that's the 50 maybe. That's the amount you have to do to get the license. 50 hours. I constantly felt this doesn't make sense.
Like that doesn't seem like enough time to learn how to fly a helicopter.
It's even worse because you basically learn to fly the helicopter in 4 hours.
4 hours?
4 hours they learn, and that's it. And then the remaining hours, you just do all kinds of weird maneuvers in case something weird happens. Like how do you land with no engine if the rotors fail? So most of the learning is 4 to 5 hours, which is less than I did in a car.
Right. Yeah.
Then 50 or 40 something more, you just kind of train for all kinds of extreme cases that you never actually.
You hope you never run into. But if you spend 4 hours learning and then they're like, the other 36 hours are about emergencies, you're like, how often are these emergencies happening where the majority of our instruction is focused on that?
Also, I think that my experience is that when they happen, usually they don't, like you crash.
Yeah.
All the times you hear like a
if the rotors fail, well, you're dead, really. But here's how you might want to try to salvage that, but you're dead. Oh yeah, go ahead.
That's my image of. So it really felt unsafe the entire time, and I felt okay, never again.
I'm always like, go on a helicopter tour, and Jen's like, "No, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it." And then I'll get her like right at 90% of being able to do it, and then it's like 6 dead in helicopter crash, random people going to the airport, nothing eventful, nothing in Africa. They just died in New York City, like in the safest place to ride in a helicopter. They just crashed in the water.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was my friend's company. So you used to be a hacker. And what's funny about this is when I read that, I was like, but he's like a tall, good-looking dude. You're like the Bradley Cooper of hackers. But you were a child actor on Israeli TV, which I thought was interesting too. So you've had this sort of, I don't even know what you call it, like you've got your hands in everything. There's a word that's failing me right now.
I think that I heard someone using the term multi-hyphenated. That's like
multi-hyphenate, yeah.
That's like the common one. I think that you can say it like my mom says it, which is you get bored too fast.
That is interesting. That's people go, how did you have time to learn Chinese? Do all these. I just get bored fast. But there's more going on there with you because you get bored fast. A lot of kids get bored fast. They shoplift, right? They don't learn how to fly a jet. Break into a bank, which we'll get into in a little bit, become a child actor, be an art prodigy, whatever that means in Wikipedia.
I think hacking is the shoplifting of the 20th century. You just do it large scale.
Why leave the house, right? No, I'm gonna steal your money, but I'm not gonna go stand in the cold to do it. I'm gonna get all of it from the safety of my couch. Yeah, although I do believe that you're a hacker. When I heard that you took a girlfriend to see RoboCop on Valentine's Day, that's a very hacker thing to do, I think.
To be fair to her, I didn't know.
You didn't know?
It was like we were invited to be a subject in a study, and the study involved watching a movie while our brains are being scanned, and the movie was whatever was showing that day, and RoboCop was it, which I enjoyed tremendously.
I bet. I mean, it's a good movie. Yeah. Future Detroit.
He's a robot who's a cop.
Yeah.
That's like
yeah. She's like, what's not romantic about RoboCop?
Yeah.
But you weren't just a hacker; you're a penetration tester, and I think a lot of people don't really know what that means. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the idea is that you have, say, a bank, and the bank spends a lot of time building firewalls and security systems and as much as they can, things that will stop people from coming in and stealing your money. And then they want to know that it works. Now, because they know how it works, they can't really test it themselves because they know all the ins and outs. So they want to bring a person who pretends to be a hacker, a villain from the outside, to try to steal the money from the inside as if they were trying to kind of steal your money. There's teams, and I was in one of those teams who performed this task. They're a penetration tester, as in they try to penetrate. This sounds a little bit kinky.
Yeah, no, of course.
Their job is to try to break into the bank from the outside and steal money, and then come to the bank and say, hey, here's how we did it. So now you know how hackers could do it. Now you can build better security because you have a kind of intuition of how it actually will be done.
A couple of my friends do this still professionally. They're really good at it. They also, you might even know them. We'll talk about it after the show. They consulted for Mr. Robot as
Oh,
well.
I know at least one of them probably.
Dave Kennedy, maybe. Is that name ring a bell? He wrote SET, the social engineering toolkit.
Cool.
There's a couple other guys. And back in the day, I used to help them with some stuff, and they've got really funny stories. For example, breaking into a warehouse and it's 2:00 in the morning and they're like, oh, the motion thing that's in the inside unlocks the door when you're going out. So if we can trigger that from the outside, but how do we do it? So they're wiggling sticks under the door, nothing's doing it, and they go, it must have to be something bigger. What's open at 2 a.m. that is the size of a person that's not a person? A blow-up doll from a porn store. Shove that under the door, inflate it on the inside, and then move it around. And sure enough, the motion detector unlocks the door and they walk in.
The crazy thing I heard recently was something like a person from the outside connecting to the guest network of the house that's open. Through that, connecting to the laptop that speaks on command. You can kind of trigger a command, make the laptop say a word that's being heard by the kid's child monitor. So it moves the sound from the bedroom of the kid to the living room where Alexa sits, and they tell Alexa to unlock the door.
Wow.
And Alexa then lets
Of course. So, oh, wow. So, wait, that's a little convoluted. So they join the guest network on the Wi-Fi. They connect to the laptop that's in the office.
Yeah, in the kids, I think, bedroom, there's like a little laptop that kind of speaks, that listens and speaks, and that's how they make it sound. Something that then gets transmitted.
The baby monitor.
Yeah.
Right. So then they'd had that transmit to the other room where the Alexa sits, the Amazon Echo. Then that unlocks the smart lock.
Yeah.
Ooh, outsmarted yourself there, smart home. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's classically how this stuff works, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, and I've found serious bugs in everything from banks to smart home software where I'm like, anybody who's on my Wi-Fi network is now getting a pop-up from the smart home that's like, do you want to connect to the lock?
Yeah.
So I can stand outside your house, and it's like, do you want to connect to the lock? Sure. Dink, because their smart home is already authorized. These things are not designed security first.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem.
I think they're aimed at efficiency and comfort and user interface, which usually is a trade-off with security.
Right.
The more convenient it is, the more it is made to be such that, grandma can easily just set it up and install it and it's going to work. It means that it's not supposed to be something that she would spend a lot of time playing with.
Right.
And then security is secondary, and that's how it's going to work out.
Yeah, oof, scary.
Yeah.
But you didn't just hack into bank systems and fake wire money. I mean, you actually walked into the bank, which seems like a good way to get shot by the cops. So can you tell us how that works?
Sure. So as a hacker, your main job is usually to sit at home and try to hack into the system virtually and
Right.
just kind of move money the way it's done in movies.
Yeah.
But the mandate that you get is actually even bigger. They also say you can test also the organization. Like if you think that the person who reports to this person isn't the right one, maybe someone calls and says there's a hack. Who does the person who gets the kind of call connect with? Sometimes systems don't have that, and then you have to help them just structure the system to respond to a hack fast. That's another thing that hackers do. Sometimes it's just about the safety of the system. So maybe there's a camera that's supposed to monitor everything, but it's on the street outside, and you can just knock it, and that's it. Now you can enter the bank with no one seeing. So there's a lot of things that you have to check that are what's called physical or organizational, and that's in the charter of hackers. Now, most of the times we don't do that because we're not good at that. This is not our bread and butter. What we know to do is how to hack. But every now and then, my team and I said, let's actually try to exercise this line in the contract that says that we can actually try and rob the bank and see how it works. And we did that multiple times by really going to banks and, coming in, ski masks and pretend guns and say, this is a robbery, give us the money, do all of that. We did it in small branches where you think that it's not going to be a problem. We did it by usually telling the bank's kind of security system in advance that's just the teller don't know. But
I would
everyone's-
imagine. Oh, the teller doesn't know?
Yeah.
So you walk in with guns and she's like, oh man, I should have written my will. I got to call my kids. That's got to be illegal in the US.
So I don't know if I bet it's illegal to an extent, is then you have to do a lot of things before, but I think it actually something that should be tested. So if it's illegal, then there should be some way to make it legal such that it will actually be tested. Maybe you have to contact the security, maybe you have to tell the bank teller that it will happen at some point in the next year so they can know what to do. But the point is that if you don't practice something, then when real things happen, you don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I guess if you just tell the bank teller, look, there's a fake bank robbery happening. I'm not going to tell you much more than that, but just they're not going to shoot you. I'm going to be here.
Yeah.
They work for us. Don't panic. They're wearing this, this, and this. So when they come in, act as you normally would, but you're not going to die.
Yeah.
That's like the bare minimum you should tell this poor gal working at the front.
I think that's the right way to do it, but I really think that if you don't try it, then the first test is when it's happening, and that's not a good idea.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. You, like, oh, turns out we shouldn't leave the key to the vault in the lock of the vault because someone can just jump over the counter.
Post-it note that says the password is here.
And you've seen stuff like that, right? Yeah.
All the time.
Oh, the password's really long and complicated, so we just wrote it on everybody's keyboard. We printed it out with a label maker.
Exactly.
What? Yeah. Well, I know you've mentioned that you attribute a lot of your understanding of the brain to the way and the way that you research a lot of the neuroscience that you're doing to time spent breaking codes and doing pen testing. Can you give us an example of maybe something you've used in hacking that you're using in neuroscience?
So, yeah, for example, a few years ago when we were hackers, we were tasked with breaking into a big telecom company. So one of those like AT&T, T-Mobile, one of those big companies.
Yeah.
And we tried any possible way and we failed. So we couldn't get in. And then we tried the old-fashioned way, which is you just call and you kind of ask the person for the password. So the way it went is we waited for Friday afternoon, like around 5 p.m. when people really want to go home, to call and start nagging the person on the other side on things. And what actually happened was that the teller on the side of, let's call them AT&T for the sake of just this illustration.
For the hypothetical, it's hypothetically AT&T, but
Let's call them
only
AT&Q.
AT&Q, yes.
So it will be misleading.
Yes.
So we call the person there and we say, hi, we're the kind of technician on the ground somewhere and there's a failed cell tower and we can't access it to fix it. Please give us the password. And she said, no. I'm trained not to give it to you, so no. And we say, no, trust us. It's really us. Look at the kind of monitor. You see that there is a broken cell tower in this particular place that we're telling you about. And she looks and it is indeed the case. There is a broken cell tower. And we tell her, look, it's Friday afternoon right now. If we don't fix it, it's going to be broken for the entire weekend. And hundreds of people won't have reception for the entire time. Help us fix that. She says, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to give you the password on the phone. Then we say, look, we even remember the first three letters, like it's AQL. So you trust us that we just forgot the last three, kind of convincing her in any possible way. Bottom line, she says no. So we hang up the phone and we say, okay, that's it, failed. And then on Monday morning, the chief security officer for that company comes to the office, learns about the incident where there was no kind of reception for the entire weekend. And the technician called and this woman didn't give the password, and he is proud of her. He said, that's amazing. You did this thing that was supposed to be a test, and you managed to do it. So he calls her and he says, I want to actually make your case into a big story in the company. I'm going to circulate an email to the entire company telling everyone what happened, how you were under stress and pressure to give the password, but you didn't do it the way you should, and everything is great. And he starts talking to her and asking her questions like, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the company? How long have you been in this position? Kind of where did you get to school? And as she gives all the answers, the company gets hacked and all of the data is stolen. And that's because not only was the person calling her on Friday me, but also the person calling her on Monday morning me. So we pretended to be the chief security officer. And in asking her question, we basically got all the information we needed about her to let us in. Her mother, maiden's name, the school she went to, the pet, everything we needed to know to basically pretend to be her, get her password, and now get through her account to everything.
Yeah.
Now, this is the hack kind of in the computer world. But what we learned from that is that people tend to really trust someone from the inside. a lot more than they try someone from the outside. So if I try to start telling you information right now that you think is not true, you have all the filters in the world to not let it into your brain. You'd say this is not accurate, fake news, I don't believe it, and you're going to stop it from letting into your brain. But once it's in your brain, you trust it. So if someone from the inside contacts you and says, hey, this is what happens, you tend to not vet that information. And that's something that we know about the brain. Meaning, everything that's in your head that got there, you think is facts. So for instance, if someone tells you right now that we're not here, that you and I are
That
not
I'm
in this...
not in a recording studio with Moran Cerf.
Someone says, actually, you're at home right now, waking up in bed. I say, what do you mean? I see Moran in front of my eyes. I have all the sensations of that. What are you talking about? You would not let any argument convince you otherwise because you learned all your life to trust your mind. So whatever your mind says is true. If someone tomorrow says that your memory of today is not accurate and it didn't happen, you would say, what are you talking about? It doesn't matter how many videos you show me of me hanging out in the beach. It doesn't matter how many people you bring that say, hey, yesterday we were playing golf in the morning. Whatever, all the information in the world would not change your mind because you are trained through millions of years of evolution to trust your own mind. And that is what's now under scrutiny because hackers of the brain can actually get into your mind and change how you think. And that is something that we don't know how to deal with. Like our brain is not trained to not trust itself. We have this tagline in my lab that says, don't believe everything you think.
Don't believe everything you think.
And that is the new world that we're going to have to get used to. A world where our own thoughts might not be kind of our safe game, our fair game for hackers.
Especially this with deep fakes. And I know this is slightly different than what you're talking about, but like with deep fakes, you can watch a video of yourself doing something. And most people have not seen this, a deep fake of themselves. There's a tool that a acquaintance made called Descript, and I use it for the podcast sometimes, and they have it's a transcription service. But one thing that they have that is not public is called Lyre, Lyre, very clever. And it will take, if you tell it which voice is yours and you give it permission and you give them permission, I can type out words in my voice and I run hundreds of hours of audio through it and I can make myself say something. So if I wanted to put a clever little joke in the middle of this and I didn't have time, or I say a word weird and I want to get rid of it and I say it in a proper way, I can type it out and put it in there.
Amazing.
But if I get a bunch of your talks and I feed it in there and these guys are sleeping and I give it permission to edit your voice, which is something they've protected against, I could play audio of you saying something really like different that you would never say, or horrible, or something negative about your friends, and I could play it for you, and you would then have to go, there's no way I said that, but I'm listening to my own voice say it, and it sounds pretty damn real.
The new movie by Marilyn Monroe. You take a dead person and make a new movie with them.
It's only a matter of time, right? Like, oh, this is Fred Astaire, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and I don't know, Audrey Hepburn starring in a new action movie with Hulk Hogan. Yeah. How is it possible? It's only 10 years from now, we'll have that. Maybe 20, I don't know.
So this really brings us to the world where I took the example from the hacking and to now the brain, where we're going to have to start thinking about our own thinking and vet it and say, you know what, this is a thought that I know comes from my mind, but I don't think I like this thought. And even though I came up with it, I don't trust it. And I'm going to have a friend or someone from the outside tell me, could this be a thought that I would come up with, or it's someone in my head making me say something that's not me? And this kind of changes everything when it comes to what is reality, not just from the outside, but within our own mind. That's a risky, scary future.
Yeah. Like, what happens when we can't trust our own memory, our own eyes, our own ears, our own thoughts might not be totally accurate? And
I think that I have an answer, and I'll tell you also kind of why I think it's risky. So the risk comes from the fact that the entire world we built up to now relies on your internal decision-making being the main driver of your behavior. We have sentences like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, suggesting that at the end of the day, you know what's beautiful.
Yeah.
Or the voter knows best. So if you kind of leave the voter in the ballot, they actually know what to do. Or the customer is always right. All of those assume that at the end of the day, left to your own devices, you reach into your mind, you dig in, and thoughts come up that are your thoughts. And now this is no longer the case, so we really have to change the entire system. Like voting might look different, purchases might look different, marketing might not be needed because you just make a person buy. You don't need to convince them to do it. All of those things are going to be entirely different. The solution, in 2 words, April Fools. So what I used to kind of tell my friends as a joke, but based on the hacking world, is that I'm surprised that April Fool is the only day of the year where people are actually skeptical.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah, good point.
like when April Fools, if your wife comes to you and says, "Hey, this is what I'm doing," you say, "Oh, no, I know her, and I know that this is not something that she would actually do. So let me think about it." Otherwise, you just trust everything. So it's a funny kind of idea that you suddenly start to vet everything, but this is how we should be. So if hackers would be asked, what should we do to prevent someone getting into our system? They would tell you can't. If someone decided to hack into your system, they will succeed. Usually they try kind of broad net, and that's why you're safe because they don't care about you. But if you're running for office and the entire world is looking at you and they try to find dirt on you, they're going to be able to find it if it's in your computer. So they're going to get. So the only way to respond to that is to assume that you already have been hacked and do what you do then. Meaning, if you imagine not that you're trying to build the biggest firewall to stop it, but that someone already got in, and you say, okay, now that someone got in, what can I do? Maybe I'll change my password in the morning to kind of stop them from getting whatever they already got. Maybe I will tell my friends, guys, I'm not sure I can vet any email that comes out of my kind of inbox. So you guys check that it makes sense. Maybe you check previous sent emails on your computer to see that you can remember sending everyone. You do all of kinds of things that you do when someone's already in. This is how you have to treat, I think, reality in a world where our brains can be hacked. You have to say, even though I said it, I want to revisit that. I want to maybe change my mind about things I said. You want to actually tell your friends, you help me see if there's consistency in my thoughts so I can kind of reflect on that. You basically do things as if you already are not in control and you try to respond to that.
Yeah, so it's not just skepticism, it's sort of putting a check and a balance on yourself and thinking like, all right, is this me? Does this make sense? Is what I'm seeing rational in some way? It seems like you could go overboard with that and become
Yeah.
almost, I don't know, paralyzed by this.
Yeah, it's a balance that we have to strike. Same way we do in April Fool.
Yeah.
We're kind of skeptical, but we also still live in the world and still interact and so on. And I think that it's going to become more intuitive as this becomes the lay of the land, like as people start doing that. But it definitely requires a change of how we think. It's requiring a change of the systems, like all of the systems that rely on one decision as the key thing. Like you just put the note in the ballot and that's it. Might need to be like something that you do in multiple days, or you can kind of do average of 3. All kinds of things would have to change to allow for this, but it will be the response to our world where everything else is kind of unsafe.
Right, unsafe, uncertain, yeah. You had this cool experiment. I think this was during one of your TED Talks, one of your many TED Talks, where you had people hooked up to electrodes because they were, I think, undergoing medical treatment. But in the meantime, they're just waiting to have, I guess, some sort of minor seizure, or maybe not minor. So that you're like, well, now that we got electrodes in your head, let's have you watch some movies. Let's have you watch some movie trailers. Let's have you look at some photos and seeing where their brains were most engaged. And this is really interesting. You could see when somebody was interested in Marilyn Monroe, I think was the example that you used, versus or interested in The Simpsons as opposed to watching, I don't know, historical footage. Were you able to make predictions off of what people are engaged in? Like, how can we use that?
So to explain what we're looking into,
Yeah.
those are patients who have brain disorder of sorts, typically epilepsy, that has a specific location in the brain that causes it. So if we can find the location where the problem is and take it out, we can fix them. So they try all kinds of things, and one of the things that they try is to go through brain surgery, where a surgeon opens their brain, sticks electrodes inside their head around the location that we think the problem emerges from, and then we record their brain activity continuously for days until the problem that they have manifests itself, and then we see exactly where it started and we take it out. So that's the clinical procedure. They come, electrodes are placed in their head, and they just sit there and they wait. And they could wait 2 or 3 weeks. So their brain activity is continuously recorded while hopefully they're gonna at some point have a seizure that we can trace and figure out what the origin of that is. That's the clinical part. And then I come and I say, you're already going to be here for the next 2 weeks, basically sitting in bed and just watching movies and reading books, talking to your friends while your brain is being monitored. Do you mind also me asking you questions about your movies that you prefer, the sport teams that you like, whatever, and looking at your brain from the inside and seeing how what you say matches what your brain tells me? And then they, of course, say yes. And typically what we do in the morning is we just ask them questions about their life. We talk to them for hours. Tell me about your favorite friend, about your favorite food, about places you visited. And as they speak, we look at their brain and suddenly we see, for instance, that when they speak about Marilyn Monroe, and they say, I really love this movie of Marilyn Monroe, a little cell in her brain starts firing. We say, hey, we think that we see a brain cell that came to life just when you spoke about Marilyn Monroe. Let's try again. Tell me again about your favorite 5 actors. And she says, Marlon Brando, I don't know,
Audrey Hepburn.
Audrey Hepburn, and
Yeah.
third is Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, the word are said, and boom, the cell fires. We say, okay, it seems to correlate with this. And then we try to do things like show her pictures of Marilyn Monroe, and the cell still fires. We try to have her close her eyes and imagine Marilyn Monroe, and the cell fires. So we basically found in her brain a cell, typically it's a few of them, that code the concept of Marilyn Monroe. This is what thinking of Marilyn Monroe looks like from inside your brain. A set of cells coming to life. So now that we find those cells, and presumably we found multiple of them, Marilyn Monroe cells, Eiffel Tower cells, Apple computer cells, arbitrary memories that you have in your mind that we now know exactly their location and when they're triggered, we can do things like ask you questions about your preferences. So you say something like, name the things you love the most. And they start naming them, and we look at Marilyn Monroe, and we see that the Marilyn Monroe maybe starts kind of to bubble up, getting ready to be executed as a memory before she even says Marilyn Monroe, so we can see her thoughts coming to her. We can see that it kind of comes when she thinks about things she loves. So we can start mapping not only the memories themselves, but also the connection and whether they are positive or negative and so on. In the context of engagement, in content, what we do is we try to see not only how your memories kind of work, but also how similar they are to other people's memories. So, for instance, if your set of memories are coming up in sequence that resembles that of other people who maybe bought a ticket for the movie, who maybe written in surveys that they love the movie and so on, I can predict that you actually will look like them. And I can start saying, okay, give me just one brain that I know a lot about, and let's start seeing how similar other brains are to that brain versus very different than it. And if they're all similar, we can basically say, okay, there's something profound about these people that they all experience something similar. And if one of them tells me what I experience is love, then we know that all 2,000 of them actually experience love, and we can start predicting that the movie's going to do well because 2,000 people look the same when they watch this movie.
That's so interesting. So you can tell also, are you able to tell if somebody loves Marilyn Monroe or if they're thinking about like a traumatizing thing that they don't like? You can tell the difference?
Yes, because we typically also find not just Marilyn Monroe, Eiffel Tower, Apple computer cells, we also find love cells or hate cells or ambivalence cells. So what we see is that when I ask you questions about Marilyn Monroe cells lights up, but also love cells light up. So, okay, that's very clear. It's love of this item. And if I ask you about something you don't like, you still see the thing that you don't like coming up, like they say Apple computers, but also negative emotions come up. So we can start mapping the combination to experience kind of not just the thought, but also the valence of the thought.
Oh, wow. That's a little, that the more specific that gets, the creepier it becomes in some ways.
The creepiest thing is that typically it happens under the hood, as in you don't know it. So we would know sometimes seconds before you know what's about to happen in your mind. So we can say, right now, negative thoughts are emerging. Something bad is happening, like whatever she's seeing right now in the movie is making her feel bad. She's going to start crying in 10 seconds. And then I know that you're going to start crying in 10 seconds. And you don't know it yet. Like if I stop the movie right now, 5 seconds before, and I say, what are you feeling? He would say, nothing. It's just a regular movie. And I know that if I just let your movie run for 5 seconds more, it's going to burst.
Wow. That's wild. So computers will be able to not predict, but actually read our emotions before we necessarily display them.
Read them, and also in a positive way, maybe change them. So I think that the idea would be that, like, Universal Studios would make 2 versions of the movie, and if they see that the kids are starting to feel bad during the movie, they're gonna just rewrote the narrative to a different one, so it never gets you kind of sad.
Oh, that is kind of cool. That's really cool. So do you think then in the future we'll have virtual reality, or maybe not virtual reality, but I guess it's easier to make different versions of things in VR? Teachers, doctors, trying to think who has a really important role that needs to be sensitive. Teachers and doctors are what come to mind first. Like a doctor has to be able to say, look, You've got stage 3 cancer. Now, don't get upset and freak out right now. We can treat it, but they figure out a way to tell you specifically based on how you've reacted to countless movies, conversations, teachers especially. I couldn't pay attention in school to save my life. Imagine what I would have been if I'd had a teacher that knew how to talk to me based on when I get distracted and reel me back in instead of just yelling at me to pay attention.
So I'll give you two levels: the near future and the farther future. I think
Okay.
the near future is already happening. So what you just said is what we call near future. It's already happening. So right now there are a number of companies. I'm even involved in one of them that tries to kind of help school kids that basically say, come to the classroom as a student. We're gonna put devices on your head that measure your brain activity, and the teacher is gonna teach you while getting access to what's going on in your mind. So the teacher sits there and speaks to the students, but on her monitor she sees kind of a summary of the brain activity of the students, telling the teacher they're getting it.
Mm-hmm.
So she starts speaking, and the monitor says, everyone understood it, move on. And she just kind of says, okay, guys, you all got the long division, let's move on. Or the opposite, it says, student number 3 and 7 didn't get it. So she just can say, okay, the two of you, let me explain it in a different way just to the two of you. Or it can say, everyone got it, but it's really boring. So think of a different example for the next class. So she will just get a kind of real-time feedback on what works out. So she can move on faster if everyone got it, or say it in different ways if no one got it, or just target the students that didn't get it and kind of help them. That's happening right now, monitoring the students in real time and giving the teacher feedback.
That's amazing.
Version 2 of that, still happening right now, is one where you kind of align the brain of a teacher and the brain of a student. So you look at all the teachers, look at their brains, look at all the students, their brains, and you basically match them. And you say, this teacher, the way he speaks, the way he thinks about the world, aligns perfectly with student 1, 3, and 7, but not with 2, 5, and 8. So let's create classrooms where we perfectly match teachers and students so they speak the same language and they kind of think the same way. Right now we match classes by age. Basically say all 7-year-olds, same classroom. But maybe some 7-year-olds are really into someone speaking fast.
Yeah. Like
And some
you.
of them, exactly.
Yeah.
And some like it very, very slow. And some like examples that are very visual. And some like equations. And we can actually create ways to teach a person based on their specific needs. And that would be kind of speeding up the education.
Yeah. So like I'm in the classroom with the people who listen to things well, but can't stare at a book
Exactly.
for
Perfect.
3 hours.
And a teacher that also speaks like that. So that's right now. Now that's the I call it new future to present because it's already happening. It's just something that's done mostly by companies in a very specific kind of small setting. It's not something that is offered to everyone. Unfortunately, it's in the making. Future, and sorry, I should say about doctors. Same idea. Doctors, there are some that are fact-based, some that are more empathy-based, and same idea. You're gonna go to a doctor. The system would know how you think, and it would match you with a doctor that can talk to you your way, that if she or he needs to explain to you what you're going through, they're going to use the same language. So in a way, doctors and teachers are the same in this idea because it's content. Like we want a person to talk to another person and deliver content to them, whether it's learning content or medical content, in a way that will resonate. So we can now match that. Here's the future. It won't be human.
Yeah.
It will be a machine because as you get to learn everything about Jordan and know what he wants and give him the perfect match, it turns out that the ideal way is to take all of your history, learn who you are, and find someone that can immediately, kind of instantly get all this information and ideally change for that, and know that right now you're experiencing some symptoms of emerging sadness because of the news that you got from the doctor. So the doctor needs to adapt and become from, I don't know, fact-based to empathy-based, and instead of just kind of bringing a different doctor who's that and bring one for that and one for this, we'll just have an AI that can automatically shift and align with you and know in real time what you're going through and all your history and just align with you perfectly. That's the future.
So I'm wearing goggles or something, and the doctor's talking to me and goes, as soon as it senses that I'm about to start losing it, it's like, but I'm going to be really sympathetic in the next few minutes, calm you down, and bring you back to where we can function
The
again.
bad news, now the good news a little bit, now the hope, now bad news again. Now bring your wife because she can calm you down in this thing. Now someone else that is a friend of yours who is actually an expert in this thing that will help you when I'm not here, so you can call them afterwards. Now bring their family members who are going to be the support group, like kind of basically orchestrate an entire experience for you. It will be the best way to make sure that you understand what you need to understand, do what you need to do, your behavior is going to be aligned, and not go through stress in a way that you can't handle.
Oh, amazing. There's a dark side to this, though, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm imagining them going, wow, if we can keep everyone engaged and bring them news in a way that doesn't trigger a negative emotional reaction, then we want to do that for our government propaganda
Is that right?
or whatever.
Yeah.
Like North Korea wants in on this. Well, every country wants in on
Yeah,
this.
I think that's the one of the there's 5 questions I get asked every time I give a neuroscience talk, regardless of what the talk was about. And one of them was about the ethics of that, like of being able to perfect the messaging to a person. And the answer is that it's very risky. It's not new. Like marketing have been doing that for the last 80 years, trying to kind of find it's just a lot more efficient at scale, and it's a double-edged sword. It's gonna make our life much more efficient and best, and like experiences are gonna be ideal, tailored for us. But also companies can use that to, at very least, sell us more Captain Crunch.
That's right. I mean, you think Facebook ads are engaging now. Just wait until they're tailor-made for your brain at that specific time of day, the current mood that you have right now.
There's a saying that I tell my students in the business school that spam is spam because of bad targeting. Like if you get an email that is like you're looking for a lamp and suddenly an email comes with a lamp that you really want with a price that's not spam anymore. That's perfect. Like you just thought and it came. Only when it comes and you don't need something, say, oh, that's spam, and you delete it.
Right.
So they're gonna eliminate spam. They're gonna know what you want and give you everything you want at the right time.
That's right. Like it's who keeps trying to sell me penis pills? But if you're online, like cheap penis pills from India, I would love if that just showed up in my inbox.
Yeah.
Like then you're right. Then it's not spam, right?
Yeah.
You are known for speaking fast, which I think is funny. You're doing an obviously great job right now, but I think it is funny that people tell you speak fast. What happened when you went to Japan? You gave a talk, and I know you had a translator.
This show is normally 1 hour. We're gonna finish in 10 minutes.
That's right.
I mean, people should have to play it in like a double. What is it?
2x.
Yeah, 2x to understand. So I think what happens to me oftentimes, there are funny comical moments that come with speaking fast in places that can't kind of keep up.
Yeah.
So when I was in Japan, I had to give a talk to a room full of executives, and there were 2 translators. They brought 2 because they said you speak so fast it's going to tire one of them. So in the 1 hour talk, we're going to alternate between I'll get to the point quickly. I gave a talk and I kind of tried to navigate my talk based on the audience. I started and I said, if this joke is going to land well, I'm going to continue with this kind of angle. And if not, I'm going to go with this angle, something to keep them more engaged. And whatever I tried worked beautifully because after the first joke that didn't land, the second to the 5th one, everyone was laughing at the right time, clapping at the right time, asking the right questions at the end, all of the indicators that things really were engaging. And then only in the reception in the evening, when I met the translator and I asked her how it went, she said, well, it was pretty difficult. You spoke very, very fast. And the first time I told a joke, I saw that no one got it because it was too complicated. So from the second time and onward, what I translated your sentences were something like, the speaker just told a joke, please laugh.
And so then she's like, everyone laugh right now.
Yeah, and she just told them, clap right now, ask this question. So basically she was puppeteering a room of 2,000 people with what questions to ask, to nod their head. Like all they heard was like a director cut telling them like, nod your head. He's looking at you, like, kind of like what is called a Truman Show.
Truman Show, yeah.
I was the only person who basically were in this talk.
Would you rather have not known that happened, or are you glad that you found out?
I found it amusing. I found it, okay, so I have the strategy that says like good stories happen to those who can tell them.
Yeah.
So if something happens that's embarrassing and so on, immediately tell a story about it and publicly.
Yeah.
And that's, helping you kind of resolve.
I think that makes sense. Look, I would want to know if I were in your shoes, but just not in real time, right? In real time, I'd want to believe that I was actually really funny. I know that you talked about, during one talk, you hinted at anyway, that one day we'll be able to have chips in our brain and we can maybe outsource complex thought processes to this, among other things. So like complex math, I think the example you gave was chess.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to be able to use our brain to maybe tell the chip to calculate the answer, or maybe even something like, oh, I'm looking for furniture. Find me furniture that I want, that's going to look good in the house, that's going to jibe with other things I have in my brain, return the results to me. I mean, how sort of detailed are we able to get with this?
So first of all, we should say that right now in the US, there are about 40,000 people that already have a chip inside their head for clinical purposes. So someone opened their brain.
Like a cochlear implant or something?
So this would be usually a stimulator in their head that kind of stops them from having seizures, or something that regulates hormones and kind of chemicals in their brain, or for Parkinson, to stop the tremor, you kind of give reverse current. So those are people who had a problem, and the solution was to put a chip in their head. And the chip right now is a digital device in their head that does one thing. But we know that if you put a CPU in your head, you can just turn on other features and it will do more things. It's not it's not made for one thing. It's made for a host of things, and we just use one of them. So that, in that sense, having people with a chip inside their head is already reality. It's just that we use it only for one purpose and not more. This will become, I think, a bigger reality as people will start to see benefit, and as we'll find different ways to get the chip inside. Right now, you need to have a surgery. So now, which is it's only do it in clinical reasons. But a lot of people in Silicon Valley are spending a lot of time trying to find the ways to get stuff into your head without drilling a hole in one. And once this becomes, and there are already ways to do it. Once you get that to be cheap, efficient, risk level lower.
Make it a little safer.
Then it will become a thing. So now, what does it feel like to have a chip inside your head? So the way I think about it is the way we think about mathematics, for instance. If I ask you how much is 2 plus 5, the answer just came up. Now, for that answer to come up, you actually had to go through like a 5-system interaction. You had to hear my words, turn them into symbols. What is 2, what is plus, what is 5, to send this equation to the front of your brain where there's a system that does computation and calculated the number 7, send it back where the symbol 7 becomes a word 7 and you express it. All of those things happen. You were blind to all of that. It all happened under the hood in your brain, but there are multiple systems, each doing its own job, and you kind of oversee this entire thing and you get the answer when it comes up. You don't even know what happened under. Now imagine that you replace one of them with a chip. So instead of asking how much 2 plus 5 is and getting the answer from the frontal lobe, there's going to be a chip inside your head that does computations and give it back to you. For every other system, it would look the same. It wouldn't even know that there was not a frontal lobe calculation, but that it was done by a chip. It will be one system asking the other, getting the answer after a few seconds, thinking it's it, and moving on. And if you have a chip that can do computations that are digital ones rather than analog ones, then you can also ask the question, how much is 11 times 47, which is going to be harder for your brain, but it's going to be easy for your phone, for instance. So all you have to think about is like as if your phone is now in your head. First of all, you wouldn't know it. Like the you doesn't even know which components are working. So it will just feel like you just came up with 11 times 47. And what did the effort was a chip. And if you put this chip inside your brain, it can do more than just calculations. It can do anything that your phone can do right now. Everything you can do can be done. So it can access Wikipedia and ask questions, and you'll just feel that you know when the French Revolution ended and how it went.
So I'll just that's the question. So it's not like Siri saying hey Jordan, the French Revolution ended in 1740. It's like I just suddenly feel like I know the answer, or maybe. I'm trying to put this in a case of like online shopping. So instead of saying, hey, Jordan, you just finished this book by Moran Cerf, you might also like these 3 books. I just feel like I should pick up my phone, and then I look at the screen and it's already purchased, downloaded, and installed in Audible or whatever, another book that it already knows I like. But it didn't tell me to pick up my phone. I just went, I'm going to pick up my phone. Oh, okay.
The same way you know how much is 2 plus 5 without thinking, okay, I'm going to send it to Thinker and come back. You just know the answer. And the same way when you feel like you want to pick a book, you just pick the book. You will just feel that you want to pick this book, and you wouldn't even know that pick up this book. You wouldn't even know that the behind the scene was like, let's look at recommendations and see which book. You will just pick up a book, and that would be the book that you wanted. You wouldn't know that for that to happen, your brain actually searched 10 different books and what people like you wanted and figured out that your best choice is this, and this is what you will feel you just wanted to do.
So if that then has digital interface, we could really give people super senses for specific purposes in a way that doesn't violate someone's privacy per se, or at least not in the same way. Because right now, if I go through the TSA scanner and someone says, oh, I can see, remember they had the whole like, oh my God, they can see us naked on the scanner. You remember that whole thing? Well, instead of, oh my God, they can see us naked on the scanner, that person might have an implant that searches for weapons just using their eye. And then they just say, I feel like we need to search that person more. Not I can see them naked in my scanner, super scanner vision. Just that person's carrying something. My brain tells me that they are. I can't see their junk though.
For the person, it might even seem like you'll just see it. So you'll just see people walking around and one of them has a gun on them, and you just say, hey, you come with a gun. The same way right now, if someone has a gun on their kind of shoulders or in the pocket, you just kind of see something kind of popping up and you say, come
Yeah.
up, it will just be visible. Like it will be,
Experienced cops can do that. Like, look at the way he's walking. He's packing heat. Like you, well, at least in all the movies that I watch, right? They
this will
can
be
do that.
this will be like it wouldn't feel like we're actually doing processing. Like the interface, this scanner is a sensory processing that feeds into our brain. We'll just eliminate it. So the same way you will be the scanner. You will just see three people and say, okay, this person with the three people just come to us. You wouldn't say I'm feeling something. You just like see people, and one of them would walk with like three dots on them, and you say, come with these three dots. What's going on? And that's it. It would just be intuition.
So if that becomes intuition and our brains can make us feel things based on this chip that is connected to the internet, then my hacker brain, your hacker brain has to be firing and going, well, wait a minute. That means that somebody can go into our brain and make us feel something that is not necessarily based on our current perception. So maybe someone has hacked into my brain and made me feel like I need to give all my money to this random stranger.
So we're going back to the beginning where we
Right.
started, in the same circle, which is the benefits that come with being able to expand our reality come with the risk that someone else is going to show us different realities.
Yeah.
That is the risk. And I think society and your audience is the perfect kind of people to really start reflecting on that. Let's decide if we want the benefits with the risks that come. And that's historically something that was always the case when technologies emerged that are good. When nuclear power became a thing, you could power cities, but you can also make nuclear bombs. And people had to decide whether they want the good with the bad. When the steam engine emerged, you could, create trains that move freight from New York to Los Angeles in 48 hours and also move Jews to Auschwitz with the same thing. So I think that society has to decide. And in that sense, I think scientists are no better than anyone else. I can tell you what can be done, and you can see with dollar signs all the good things that will come from you being able to make someone buy what you want, and you can see all the bad things that come with you being the product now and someone making you buy what they want. So all companies will have to make a choice. I would say that historically, humans have not been great in harnessing technologies. Every time we could do something and we could use it for bad, we used it for bad. So in that sense, I think we're not, we don't have a good track record.
Like right now, if someone says this type of person should not be allowed to live anymore because they have inferior genes, I go, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. That all my critical thinking bells and alarms are going off. But what if they just make me and a million other people around me feel that way, and we can't quite put our finger on why, but it's because they're manipulating us to do that because we're gearing up for a war with, I don't know, another country. Then I don't have a chance to be going back full circle to what we started. I don't have a chance to filter it before it gets in my brain. It starts in my brain.
There are many things right now. So I think that the good news for us is that we can look a little bit at the past and see how it looked small scale and predict. So marketing is that, right? Propaganda is that. Like we already know that you can manipulate crowds of people to do things. It happened in history multiple times. And we only think that they had some kind of free will because no one was in their head, but it was two-step. Like the good marketing people, good kind of politicians, they're basically doing that. It's just that because we have some kind of way to filter, we believe that we had a free will, but it's not that far. Like Mussolini and a lot of like authoritarians in the past, they were amazing in taking a crowd of people and mobilizing them to some behaviors that individually, if you ask them, they didn't want to do 10 minutes before the speech started. So this has happened.
And that technology was reel-to-reel tape, old 1920s microphones, and metal cables.
The interface was our ears and our eyes.
Yeah.
So now the interface is going to be different interface, but it still goes into this very, very fragile entity that sits between our ears, our brain, and changes a few neurons there, and that's it. You'd behave differently.
So it's like the radio and television was their primary, not even television, just radio was their primary method of communication. Imagine if it's beamed into everyone's brain simultaneously, not through ears and eyes.
There's an experiment that I love from the 80s. This guy, Ash, it's called the Conformity Experiment, where he brings 10 people to the lab, and he says, I'm going to show you a picture with two lines. One is kind of very short, one is very long, and I'm going to ask you one by one to tell me if they're the same length or not. So one by one, he shows you
Oh, yeah.
cards. One of them have the same length, one of them are very, very different. Like not, and then he shows you, say, one card and the lines are the same, and he asks the first person, he says, same, 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 same. 10 people say the same, move on. Then he shows another one where the lines are very different, and he goes to the first person who says different, the second says different, the third, so on. Then he goes to card number 3, and the lines are very different, but the first guy says same. And then the second guy says same. And the third guy says same, and what we're interested in is what does guy number 7 says.
Because he's the only normal.
He's the only normal subject. So everyone else is a Confederate, and they agreed that on the third trial, they're all gonna give the wrong answer. And what we see is that guy number 7 sees 2 lines that are clearly different length, but he hears the first guy saying same, and the second guy saying same. By the time they get to him, he says same. So it takes like 5 minutes and 10 people or 9 people that change reality for you to also change your answers. And we know that if you change your answers, you also start convincing yourself because of cognitive dissonance that what you did was actually correct. By the time they leave the room, these people actually believe that they saw a line of the same kind of length, even though it's different. And they're going to convince others. And that's opening a world where our memories are malleable, so much so that we can't really trust ourselves. With small influence, without, a big kind of propaganda machine that tries to kind of convince you just by you trying to conform. And that's 80s. That's 40 years ago.
Yeah, the videotape of that experiment's like all grainy and everyone's wearing these like really short t-shirts and stuff. You can tell it was like 1982 when they did this.
And so this is the old-fashioned, the easiest way to and now we have a lot more efficient and complicated ways to do that. The extreme version of is getting into your brain and actually changing neurons mechanically, so you will wake up with different thoughts. But all of those are the same idea, that you kind of are fair game. Yeah, and that's it. From then on, everything is changing.
And we see this on social media too. If everyone's saying, look at these people doing this, and you keep getting bombarded with this filter bubble, then eventually you start to say, well, I know that the correct answer here is to get outraged by whatever news article shows up in my feed.
We have now studies in my lab on that, looking at like echo chambers and how they're formed. And we're looking at what does your mind do to my mind just by us being in the same room. And it turns out that there's a lot of things that happen between two brains that make them synchronize when we're experiencing the same content that actually changes your thoughts without you really thinking them. So the bottom line is that if you're sitting in the room with people that are similar to you, you hear things differently than if they're different than you. So the same room can have 4 people who say the same things, but the things get heard differently by different people, and they get kind of their processing is different, and their what's getting kind of coded is different. Wow. So you can say the same things and be surprised that one person hears that and the other person hears that, or you can manipulate what they hear. You can actually start kind of really understanding how the brains influence each other and how echo chambers are formed.
So that's a great reason to listen to the show, because the more people and ideas that you're around that are smart or skeptical or informed, the better off you are. But it's a warning too, because if you and I are hanging out, we're like, oh, this is good. But then if I go home and I'm hanging out with a bunch of people who are sitting around smoking pot all day, talking negatively, hate their job, hate their life, and I'm going, good thing I'm not like them. It's like, well, you're becoming more like them through, I don't know, osmosis or whatever the hell the natural process looks like.
So I guess the practical advice I would give too, one is generally, stories and communication are the best way to checks and balances kind of creation of your own ideas. You bring people and you tell them your ideas, you voice them, you look at their kind of response, you hear their views, you get the best kind of way to analyze and process your own ideas. If you just think about them yourself and you don't share them, you don't broadcast them, you will be confined to your echo chamber. If you only talk to the same people that you talk all the time, you will get a bigger but still small chamber. The more you expose to other views, you will actually refine your ideas. So the advice to people that is not what people do right now is go outside of your bubble and just talk to people that are not in your kind of sphere. You will, at the very least, you will get exposed to different opinions. At best, you can actually get a more nuanced understanding of your own ideas. Like, it's good for you to be with, I don't know, the most extreme version of the other side as a way to really understand how thinking works. That's advice number 1. Advice number 2 is if you actually want to change your behavior. If you have a behavior that you say I want to change, the best way to do it is to find people that exhibit the behavior that you want and be next to them. Don't ask them, how do you do it? Don't kind of try to learn it. Just be next to them. Your brain will adopt those signals over time. So if you're the kind of guy who's always late, you try your best to be on time, but you're still always late, and you want to be on time, just really put yourself next to people that are not that, people that intuitively are on time, a few days with them, and you don't have to ask them, like, how do you calculate time? Just like be next to them, it's
Yeah.
gonna rub onto you by osmosis, and you'll become that somehow magically. And it's true for time, it's true for thinking about complex ideas, it's true for humor if you want to be funny, it's true for like the opposite if you're kind of too much of a joker and you want to be a little bit more serious. The people around you have a strong effect on who you are, and you can get out of your bubble by being next to other people.
That's really interesting. There's a sort of common trope among self-help people. You only go as high as your 5 closest friends, or you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Turns out there's science behind that. It's amazing.
I think the one thing I would change in the world is I would not call it self-help. Like self-help kind of suggests that it's about you helping yourself.
Yeah.
I would call it like others help. Like there should be
Yeah.
a shelf that says others help, and you go and you help others and others help you. And this would be like the best way to actually change.
Yeah, that's a good point. So personal growth might be a better all-encompassing term, because you're not really doing much. You're in the room. They're the ones who are helping you. There's a really interesting experiment that you conducted where this magician was handing photos. You say, who's the better looking person? Can you take us through this? Because it really illustrates how we just lie to ourselves
And we
constantly.
have now version 2 of that, so I can
Yeah.
tell you even what came up since the experiment came up the
Great.
first time. So the experiment looks basically like that. A person, if you're a subject, comes to the lab. We tell you that we're going to ask you now to choose who you find more attractive out of 2 options. So we pull 2 cards with 2 pictures of, say, 2 women that you don't know, that are just kind of strangers. And we say, of those 2, who do you find more attractive? And you say the one on the right. We say, fantastic, take the card you selected and hold it in your hand and say in 1 sentence why you liked her. So you look at the card and you say, I really like her smile. We say, fantastic, put it inside, let's try another one. Pick 2 new cards, 2 different women. Again, you don't know them, you look at them for a second and you say the one on the left. We give you the card you chose and we ask you to explain why you chose this one, and you say, I really like her hairstyle. Fantastic, let's do it again and again. For the next hour, we pull 100 of kind of pairs and we show you the pairs, you make a choice, you hold it, you explain, you move on. But here's the trick. The guy that gives you the card isn't just a regular guy, he's a magician that we hired, and he uses sleight of hands in every one of 20 trials or so to give you the card you didn't choose. So if you chose card A, he hands you card B. And the 2 interesting outcomes of this study were that A, first, people don't notice that they didn't get what they chose. So they ask for A, they get B, and they don't say, sorry, I asked for A, you gave me B. They just take B and hold it in their hand as if this was their choice. And the more interesting result is that they then hold the card that they didn't choose, look at it, and explain to us why this was their choice. So they chose A, they get B, they take B, and they say, I really like her because she has beautiful eyes.
So they get handed the wrong card, the one they didn't choose, and then they begin to explain why they chose that card, just making up a story.
Exactly right. They take 10 seconds from the moment their brain made a choice to the moment their brain is asked to explain the choice, and they come up with a different answer to a different choice. And they don't notice that this wasn't the case. And this kind of alarms us because it suggests that what we think is, the core of who we are, the choices we make, is now fair game, and someone can change that, and we're going to not doubt that, and we're going to go with that. So if you think about the business world, if you go to the supermarket to buy a toothpaste, and you have like on the shelf Colgate and Crest, and you debate between them and you try to be as rational as possible about how to choose them, and you look at the price and the taste and the package and whatever, and you choose one, the Colgate, and you kind of head to the checkout to buy it, and in between the moment you purchased it, you selected the Colgate, and the moment you purchased it, I replace it with the Crest, you probably will just buy the Crest and go home with it. And if I actually stopped you on the way outside and I say, I'm from Procter & Gamble and I'm doing a survey and I want to know why you chose Crest, please give me an answer, you're going to come up with an answer. And what we learned in the recent version of this study is that actually the more I ask you about it, the more I ask you to narrate your thoughts, you get more and more committed to the answer that you have, so much so that if I bring you back the day after and I say, Jordan, let's do it again. Let's again show you the 100 cards that you've seen yesterday and just do the same thing as before. If I show you the 2 cards that you were seeing yesterday, when you chose A and I gave you B and you explained B, this time you actually choose B. So I showed you on day 1 A and B, you chose A, you got B, you explained it. On day 2, you actually will choose it. So in asking you to explain why you chose something, I made you create in your brain more connection associations towards B, that will actually make you be the day after. So think about it like in the world. It means that if I ask you more about the crest in the supermarket and I ask you, please explain to me why you like crest, and let's do a focus group and let's kind of ask you why you like crest model Colgate, you will convince yourself now that you want crest, even though this wasn't your choice 10 minutes ago. So much so that you're going to, from now on, always buy crest. So if I were to give advice to like a business company, I would say, don't bother market to people. Just sneak it in their baskets after they made a choice of whatever, put a different thing and ask them why. By asking them why, you're going to make them create in their mind the answer that you want. They're going to do the marketing inside their head. So they're just going to buy whatever you want from then on, not just one time.
Jeez, that's crazy. So we just sort of reinforce whatever choice they made or reinforce a choice they didn't make, and we've got them for life.
The advice that I kind of give people that is difficult, but it's good for couples and it's good for individuals, I can summarize it by don't ask why as much. So the point is that if I just replace the two options and I give you one, you will take it, but you will leave home and tomorrow you're going to choose the first thing again. You wouldn't change. By asking you why, I make you reflect on the choice that you didn't make and create associations for that new option, which actually then solidifies it in your brain. So by asking someone why, you make them think and come up with an answer. So if someone asks you, hey, why did you become what you became?
I just come up with a story.
Exactly.
But if I look at my actual history, it's not really the reason.
Exactly.
You gave an example of guys named Dennis becoming dentists with a higher than chance probability. I assume that's what's going on here.
This is, So basically, there's two aspects to it. One is if you ask dentist, why did you become a dentist? Then you make it worse. Because by asking why, you make them come up with an answer, and then now they're going to actually believe the answer more than the truth. And from now on, their answer becomes reality, and they're going to follow the answer, and that's where it becomes really hard. So if you don't ask why, they're going to not know why. They're going to not reflect. The reason it works actually is something that we call implicit egoism, which is that a person whose name is Dennis works in the world many, many days and hears his name being called. He says, sorry, you called me? And the person says, no, I didn't call you. I just spoke about dentist. He said, oh, sorry. But he the word dentist has emerged in his life. And he just hears about dentists so much more than us that when he becomes 35 and he needs to choose a profession, actually the weights towards dentistry are much higher in his brain. He just heard about dentists a lot more. They think that they're everywhere. So he actually chooses to be one, not because he really chose to be a dentist after thinking about all the options. Somehow in his mind, he just thinks, I guess everyone is dentist. So I should be one too.
And then, of course, if we ask him, he's like, well, I always wanted to help people, and the anatomy of the mouth is interesting, and I like talking to people when they can't talk back. I don't know, whatever.
The why is the enemy of many things, because it forces us to collapse into an answer and go with it. And then we get convinced, and from then on, it's really hard to change.
There's a ton of stories, there's a ton of things we could get into, but I would love to end on sort of a fun note with all of this brain control dystopia and all this, the kind of thing. Speaking of being on time, you once got sent to Rome and ended up someplace else. This is such a funny story. Would you mind just sort of giving us like the 5-minute version?
I wish this was the only time this happened to me, but it's a common thing with me. So me and things that happen on a certain time don't work well. Airplanes are the biggest enemy of people like me.
Okay.
So in one of the stories I told once, I was supposed to fly from Israel to Italy, to Rome, and almost kind of missed the flight, got there on the last minute, stuck my hand baggage above and fell asleep. Woke up when the plane touched down, left the airplane, got a cab to the Hilton Hotel, and on the way to the Hilton Hotel, kind of asked the driver for information about Rome, because I've never been there before. And I asked him, like, what's the weather in Rome? And he says, it's like 20 degrees right now. And I say, okay, great, so a t-shirt is good. And I say, so what are the things that you should do in Rome? And he says, well, you definitely have to go see the Piazza and the Vatican. And he kind of gives me an answer. We get to the hotel. I try to check in. They say, you're not in our list, no reservation. We kind of go back and forth. I finally find the confirmation number, give it to the person there, and she says, sir, your reservation is for Hilton Rome. And I say, oh my God.
The Hilton in Rome.
Yeah. I said, I'm not in Hilton? She says, no, you're not in Rome. You're in a different country. So the plane had a stop. I got off the plane. I took a cab, asked the driver to get me to Hilton, which existed in this other place as well, Malta. And
You were on Malta?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, God.
And
Not even close.
and then on the way, I keep asking him, I said, like, what's the weather in Rome? He says, in Rome, it's 20 degrees. Wonder why he asks me, but okay. And I asked him, like, what's there to do in Rome? He says, well, in Rome, you should go get pizza. But, like, he keeps answering. He doesn't know why I'm asking him about Rome, only on...
Yeah, because he doesn't think to say, you do know you're in Malta right now,
Yeah.
right? Like, of course you know that.
Yeah.
You're in a cab in Malta.
Yeah, so that was we discovered quickly that I'm in the wrong country. That at the same time the airport went to kind of whatever DEFCON 5
DEFCON 5.
because an Israeli guy flying by himself without any suitcase disappeared. Like they're looking at the security camera to see what happened. Like the plane cannot take off. Like it was supposed to be a stop and continue. They figured out where I was. They had me come back. The security somehow made me pass from the outside into the plane within 5 minutes, and I was back in my seat after about an hour and a half.
After a quick explosives and weapons pat down, you're back on the plane.
Back on the plane to everyone's dismay.
Yeah, you must have been everyone's favorite passenger.
Like 3 a.m. instead of 1 a.m. we landed in Rome. Same thing, go to the cab, ask what's to do.
Yeah, so you ended up flying to the wrong place, got off the plane at the wrong place, ended up going to the hotel, escorted back onto the plane. I mean, that's not just being late. That's like extra talented. It's their fault though for letting you run off the plane during this.
That's what I think. It's their fault.
Yeah, that's right. Couldn't be your fault.
Yeah.
Well, you were on time for this, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.